When you think about the most pivotal moments in Western history, the trial and death of Socrates in 399 BCE has got to be right up there. We all kind of know the story, right? This brilliant philosopher gets condemned by an angry mob just for speaking his mind. But what if that story, the one we've all heard a million times, completely misses the point? What if Plato, who was our main source for all this, was actually trying to tell us something way more radical and, frankly, way more dangerous? For centuries, this has been the go-to take. The 19th century philosopher John Stuart Mill nails it right here. The story goes that Socrates is the ultimate martyr for free speech, the lone genius standing up against the tyranny of the majority. And look, it's a powerful story. It's inspiring. But here's the twist. If you actually read Plato's account of the trial, Socrates never once defends himself by claiming a general right to free speech. Not once. His real defense is about something way more personal, much more radical, and for the city of Athens, a whole lot more dangerous. Okay, so let's start with that popular image. Where did this whole idea of Socrates, the free speech martyr, even come from? Because it's an image that has seriously echoed through the centuries, shaping how we think about intellectual freedom and resistance. And wow, has this idea had legs? People have put Socrates in the same category as religious martyrs like Jesus and Thomas More. He became a huge role model for leaders of civil disobedience, from Thoreau all the way to Martin Luther King Jr. He's become this universal symbol, a warning against the state trying to silence its critics. But as powerful as that is, it really, really simplifies what was actually going on. So if his big defense wasn't about a universal right to free speech, then what was it about? Well, to figure that out, we have to look at what Socrates actually said in that courtroom. And his real defense? Well, it paints a completely different picture. And this slide right here perfectly captures the core misunderstanding. See, Socrates isn't arguing for everyone's right to say whatever they want. He's making a case for the absolute necessity of a specific way of life. That famous line of his, "The unexamined life is not worth living," isn't some political slogan. It's his personal mission statement. So what on earth is this examined life? Well, you can think of it as this relentless personal mission to perfect yourself. It's about constantly challenging your own beliefs, hunting down contradictions in your own thinking, and trying to live a life that's guided by pure reason, not just by what's popular or what you've always been told. For Socrates, this was literally the only way to live a life that had any value at all. Now, you might think this is all just a personal philosophy, right? But this quest had absolutely explosive political implications. The trial very quickly became about something much bigger than just one man's philosophy. It turned into a battle for the very soul of Athens. So here's what it all boils down to. The real fight was about education. Who gets to shape the minds of the next generation? Is it the city, with its traditions and its politicians? Or is it the philosopher, the guy who questions absolutely everything? That was the real battleground. And this is where Socrates pulls off this brilliant, kind of gutsy move. He completely flips the script. He wasn't just defending himself to Athens. He was putting Athens on trial, forcing the city to defend itself in the court of philosophy. He was challenging the very foundation of their democracy, this idea that ordinary people actually had the wisdom to govern themselves. Now, to really get why Athens was so threatened by all this, we have to zoom out and look at the historical context. I mean, this trial did not happen in a vacuum. It happened in a city that was reeling from some serious trauma. I mean, just look at this timeline. Athens had just been through the ringer. A devastating 30-year war with Sparta that they lost, a humiliating defeat. Then, a brutal Spartan-backed dictatorship known as the 30 Tyrants took over. So when democracy finally got restored just a few years before the trial, it was incredibly fragile, it was paranoid, and frankly, it was looking for someone to blame. And right or wrong, Socrates looked suspicious. Why? Well, you know the saying, you are the company you keep. His inner circle included guys like Critias, who was a leader of the 30 Tyrants, and Alcibiades, the rock star general who ended up betraying Athens and defecting to Sparta. So in the eyes of a lot of Athenians, the fruit of Socrates' teaching looked an awful lot like treason and tyranny. Okay, so with all that in mind, let's look at the charges themselves. Because it turns out the official indictment was really just the tip of an iceberg. It was built on a foundation of public prejudice that had been laid down for decades. So Socrates said he was basically fighting on two fronts. First, you had the old accusers, led by the famous comic playwright Aristophanes. Years before the trial, his play The Clouds painted Socrates as this kind of subversive weirdo who denied the gods and taught people slick tricks to win any argument. That caricature created this deep-seated public prejudice against him. And that prejudice is what allowed the new accusers, a couple of politicians named Anytus and Meletus, to come in and make their formal charges of impiety and corrupting the youth actually stick. So you take all of this, the political paranoia, the sketchy associates, the decades of bad PR, and it all sets the stage for the ultimate, timeless conflict at the very heart of this trial. A conflict between two forces that, honestly, is just as tense today as it was more than 2,000 years ago. And this right here, this is the fundamental clash. The whole goal of the philosopher is to replace mere opinion with actual rational knowledge. And to do that, you have to question everything. But for a city, for a society to hold together, the citizen has to accept certain beliefs on faith, a shared belief in its gods, its laws, its values. Philosophy, just by its very nature, is a threat to that civic faith. And this is what that charge of impiety was really about. It wasn't about Socrates being an atheist. It was a charge of civic impiety, of basically not caring about the foundational beliefs that Athens held sacred. From the city's point of view, all of Socrates' constant questioning just looked like a dangerous disrespect for the very soul of their community. So, faced with this impossible conflict, Socrates reaches a stunning conclusion. He basically argues that anyone who genuinely wants to pursue justice cannot be involved in politics. He says that to preserve your own integrity, your own soul, you have to withdraw from public life and focus on the private business of perfecting yourself. Now, for an Athenian, that was a radical rejection of everything they believed in. And so the trial of Socrates leaves us with this huge and kind of uncomfortable question. He wasn't just a martyr for free speech. He was something much more complicated. He was a man who exposed this eternal tension between the demands of the individual mind and the demands of the state. And he forces us, even today, to ask ourselves, to be truly just, do we have to turn our backs on the world?